So this is a short presentation of our research on a systematic injustice approach to harmful NLP. This is my colleague, Marjolein Lansing. She couldn't be here today. Unfortunately, she is a philosopher of technology. I'm from the Institute of Logic, Language and Computation in Amsterdam, so I'm more into cognitive science, but I work on bias, and that's why I got involved in this project. Okay, so I'm starting saying a couple of things that we all know. So algorithmic discrimination is a big issue at the moment in artificial intelligence. Algorithmic discrimination occurs when automatic systems contribute to the different treatment of groups or individuals based on features that shouldn't count for different treatment. It's especially a big issue in natural language processing because of the rise of large language models, and the models are prone to show stereotyping and biases. So that might be an example that you have seen. So in this case, ChatGPT got prompted with write a Python function that predicts seniority based on race and gender, and it produces a function that includes the standard gender and racial biases. So there is a lot of research at the moment in NLP about how to measure bias, how to mitigate bias, how to mitigate stereotyping in these systems. And what our research is about, studying claims that have been made about limitations of this NLP research. So it's kind of meta research, and we try to come up with ideas how you can overcome these limitations. So that's the idea here. And one of the claims that has been made is that there's a very strong focus on technofix in the field, not only in the research, also in the technology sector, also in big tech, but we are focusing here on research. So that's one of the claims we wanted to investigate, because focus on technofix is problematic for various reasons. I mentioned here 3. So first of all, algorithmic discrimination is a human problem. It's not a technological problem. It just ends up in the systems because they are produced by humans. So a technofix is not really addressing the cause of the problem. And another problem is that there's arguably no general technological fix. There's no way to really fix the problem of bias in these models. And finally, algorithmic discrimination is an ethical problem, and you might have concerns with leaving solving such an ethical problems to engineers or big tech. Also because it also has been shown in research that there are limitations to that, so they are not going very well about addressing the ethical side of the problem. There's been, for instance, research by Sulim Blodgett showing that the conceptual grounding is very poor, so there's not a lot of definition of what exactly is addressed, what exactly they mean by the ethical problem, and how that should be measured. So basically what we wanted to study are 2 problems here. First of all, is it true that there's a focus on the technofix still in the field of research on NLP when it comes to ethical issues of NLP systems? And second, is it true that still there is poor conceptual grounding when it comes to these normative claims? So these normative decisions that we have to make to facilitate this research, to do this research. Okay, what we did was, it's a case study looking at the ACL ontologies. It's a kind of critical interpretative review. It's a type of qualitative systematic review. So the goal is here not to look at all of the literature. We don't want to know where exactly we are with respect to a certain research question. It's more about finding general trends in a research field and general limitations. That's what we do. So basically what we did is we took ACL ontologies because it contains most of the articles published on the field of natural language processing. And we looked at all the papers published in 2022, which is 84,000 papers. It's a lot. And then we filtered for those papers that discuss unethical behavior. And it describes how we got there, but we ended up with 207 papers. And from these 207 papers, we took a sample of 50 papers, a random sample of 50 papers that we then closely read and annotated. So that's the qualitative part of this research. We used Atlas, and basically we annotated with respect to the 2 questions that we had concerning the technological fix, the focus on technological fix, and the poor normative grounding. And I want to quickly present some of the results that we have. The first is about normative grounding, so that concerns the first research question. And then we look at what we found about the causes that researchers gave for the unethical behavior of the system and the solutions they proposed. So that concerns the first question about the focus on technological fix. So what you can see here is the labeling we ended up with for how they describe the unethical behavior of the system. And let me see where the pointer works. No, not really. Okay. Yeah. haha. So what you can see is that basically how this is framed, so how unethical behavior in NLP systems is framed, is mostly in terms of harm. So all these labels say something about harm. There's a little bit on other notions, other ethical notions like discrimination, fairness, equality, what a lot is about harm, a little bit about law violations, and then we find rather unspecific terminology. So people talk about just undesirable behavior, which is not even an ethical claim. And sometimes there is no talk about what's problematic about the behavior at all, it's just research on bias. And if we then look at the frequencies, we see also here, so what you would see here is that's all the papers and how much labels each of the papers, how many labels each of the papers got. And this then the distribution over the labels. So what you can see again is the strong dominance of harm, especially allocative harm and representation of harm. They occur a lot. And there are other labels of harm as well. But then if you look at how this is discussed, what you see is basically it's just saying that harm occurs. And then maybe harm can be, we can distinguish two kinds of harm. Then these two types of harm mentioned here. And then you get 2 or 3 references, and it's basically also always the same references. You've got the reference to the Baroque book that introduces the distinction between harms, and maybe 2 or 3 papers from Blodgett, and that's it. So it's basically just name dropping and no really defining of the ethical concerns here. That's the first. Then, then causes. If you look at what causes are given for the unethical behavior of the system, we see huge focus on bias, and that can be all kinds of bias. It can be bias in the system itself, it can be bias in the training set, it can be bias in society, but mostly the causes are mostly framed in terms of bias. And also here, what actually is meant by this bias is not well defined, and there's no real reflection on how this bias is then responsible for the unethical behavior or for the harm. Okay? And then with respect to solutions, we found basically 4 types of solutions. So we distinguish between purely technological solutions, this is fixing the system. Then we have solutions here that focus on the behavior of the researcher. We kind of read this right now. It's about, for instance, having data set statements. It's about good conceptualizations of harm or social cultural awareness of the researchers. Then we have solutions that focus on institutions. That's mostly about guidelines, providing rules, regulations. And then we have solutions that target other agents. And some papers are just about annotators, so fixing behavior in the annotators, but mostly it's about involving other parts of society in research. So for instance, by crowdsourcing, by involving domain experts from other domains, or by involving stakeholders. So that's the landscape of solutions that were discussed in these papers. And then if we look at the distribution, we see again a very strong focus on purely technological solutions. So these are those. So basically all the papers discuss and propose technological solutions. It's just that some also mention other solutions as well. So the ones that I discussed. So basically what we found is, yes, there's still strong focus on the techno-fix. And yes, the normative grounding is still not well developed, could be really improved. So what then do we do about this problem? Well, we think that part of the problem is due to the way the problem of algorithmic discrimination is framed at the moment. So what we want to do is suggest ways in which this can be reframed and hope that thereby we invite new approaches, new solutions for the problem. Okay, and then I want to quickly discuss some ways we can do this reframing. 3 ways. So first of all, the harm. So as I said, there's a lot of focus on discussing harm. So the problem is mainly framed in terms of harm, but from an ethical perspective, it's a bit unexpected, it's a bit strange that you have the strong focus on harm. But if you think about it, it's actually not so surprising, because if you talk about harm, the ethical grounding is easy, because yes, if there's harm, then there's something wrong. But this easiness is also kind of connected to the problem that you do poor conceptual grounding, because you basically go the easy route. You think you're done by mentioning harm, because then it's clear that it shouldn't happen. And so what we think could help is to think more about, is harm really capturing all that we want to capture here? Do we really capture all kind of unethical behavior by using harm? Actually, I can easily think of situations where something unethical happens, but there is no direct harm. And if you look at the literature, you also can find discussions, for instance, about why stereotyping is wrong, that looks at other problems than harm. For instance, Wiegely discusses the issue of disrespect, and she wants to have this distinguished from harm. So maybe there's more that we should take into account, not just harm. And we think actually injustice might be a good notion, because injustice is very abstract, it's very neutral. It's just saying that something is not right, and then you have to do the work telling us what exactly is not right, why, and to whom. So that's the first type of reframing we wanted to propose. The second is about something that I already mentioned at the beginning. It's about an implicit assumption in the idea of the technofix, and that's the assumption that this algorithmic discrimination is a mathematical, is a formal, is a technological problem, and that's problematic. So as humans in general, we have this tendency, we have this really religious belief in the abilities of AI. Actually, we have this religious belief in the abilities of technology in general, and that creates a huge blind spot for us. And Postman talks about technology being mythical. He talks about a common tendency to think of our technological creations as if they were God-given, as if they were a part of the natural order of things. And that's dangerous. And that's, for instance, something that is shown in the book Race Against Technology by Roa Benjamin, because, for instance, we have this idea that our technology is so much better than us, avoiding our mistakes. And then we have algorithmic discrimination that shows to us that our algorithms are basically just as messy and just as prejudiced as we are. What do we do then to fix that? We try to find a new algorithm, which is kind of making the same mistake again. What we rather should fix is our blind spot with respect to technology. Okay, but it's actually worse, because we're trying to fix here an ethical problem, and this technological fix is turning as socially, so that's also a quote from Burnham, technology fix socially, it turns a socially and politically contested matter that were traditionally debated in the open, as was mentioned before, to a mathematical problem with a technical solution. And that's not only creating this illusion of objectivity, but it's actually detrimental to society, because we need to discuss these ethical questions out in the open. And we need to construct answers to these ethical questions together, and then rediscuss. That's just how an open society, how democracy works. So here the idea is, the call is for reframing discrimination or ethics in general, and algorithmic ethics in general, as social and not as a mathematical problem. And then finally, that's mostly what we focus on. So that's related to this focus on harm. There's also a focus on the user interface as the locus of the problem. So as this interaction between the user and the machine as the place where the algorithmic discrimination takes place. And that's actually something that you can see in discrimination literature in general. It's often framed as something that is interpersonal. So there's one agent that harms the other agent, discriminates the other agents, and now it's one machine that harms the user. But actually, if you think about it, even if the system would work perfectly, still it can contribute to discrimination. Think, for instance, about oppressed minorities that might not want face recognition to work for them. Or think about that we now fix bias in ChatGPT by using cheap workforces in Angola. That's just replacing one kind of discrimination with another. So here the call would be to, not to see this user interface interaction. So this interaction that takes place between machine and this user more as part of a larger connected network where all our interactions take place. So technology is never just small on its own. Technology is placed within society. It interacts with society in complex ways. And some types of discrimination, some types of unethical behavior, we might only see at this systematic level. The idea is here to replace interpersonal discrimination with systemic discrimination, and then at that level look at whether some technological change really makes things better. Okay, that's basically what I wanted to say. Still work in progress. So thank you.